Welcome to Talks with Summer, seeing the world through the eyes of another. Today I have with me Tracy Olsen. Tracy is a mentor, psychic detective, medium based in Florida, USA. She has spent decades helping people harness the power of intention, trust their intuition, and step fully into their spiritual gifts, while also helping law enforcement solve cases. She guides individuals to manifest their dreams by helping them navigate unseen energies and combines practical strategy with profound spiritual insight. Her work is a reminder that energy is eternal, love is the foundation of all connection, and we all have the ability to access guidance from any realm at any time. It's my pleasure to have you here, Tracy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me as a guest because ultimately, the more we speak these positive knowings into the world, the better it will be. We're literally raising the vibe together. I am your quintessential classic type A traditional American girl. I grew up in Daytona Beach and then in the suburbs of Central Florida. And I have to warn you today, as I warn everyone I've worked with during my different careers, I'm a bit of a bull in a china shop. Sometimes my words come out tumble, bumble, and you just have to understand it's all with good intention.
I'm all ready and prepared because I would like you to say it as you want and as you feel. So tell us, where did you grow up? Tell us about your childhood days.
Oh my goodness. I am so grateful that I was raised in a country, in a state where women had the option to stay home and raise their children if they wanted to. And I grew up on Daytona Beach. I used to get on the back of my mom's bike as a little girl. I still remember, age 1.5 or 2. And we'd go down to the beach every morning and pick through the seaweed to rescue little crabs and fish and put them back into the water. I climbed trees. I built sandcastles. I rode my bike and literally pretended it was a horse. I was from the generation when we went outside to play after breakfast, and we didn't come home until the street lights came on.
Fortunately, I also didn't have cell phones because 90s was our childhood time. So we got to experience all those times. And it's so funny because today when you walk out, everybody's just looking at their phones and they're almost ready to bump into you.
It's so true.
So what motivated you to do what you do? Or in other words, how did you take this path in life that you are on? And also, if you would tell everybody a little bit about what you do and what that path actually is.
Oh, thank you. Well, I did not choose this life. It chose me. And what I've realized is this has been a gift, an attribute that has served me my entire life. In essence, I have developed all of my senses, including my sixth sense. So what that means is when I was a little kid and I would tell my friend, well, don't ride your bike on that ramp because you're going to fall at the second orange tree. They just say, what are you talking about? And then they jump the ramp, get to the second orange tree, and fall. When I was a teacher at Lake Brantley High School here in Central Florida, I always knew which one of my students was abused, which one was dealing with a lot of heaviness at home. But I also knew which students were on the phones under the desk. So I was able to be facing this direction, but speak and call out my students behind me. And then when we had children, I always knew before something dangerous might happen. I'd see it in my mind and then it would happen. But I just thought that was normal. I thought that was just being a mom. And then when life slowed down against my wishes, when different things occurred out of my control, when the external noise of chasing slowed down and the busyness of life stopped, my intuition woke up. And being the type A person that I am, I immediately recognized it and wanted to get fully trained in understanding what I was receiving. Through that journey, I embraced my intuition and I serve as a professional, validated psychic medium. So that means if people meet with me with the intention of sharing their energy with me, I'm able to feel what they're feeling and give them guidance. If they're comfortable, then I serve as a conduit between those who have passed and are in spirit so they can communicate. And it's the most incredible gift I've ever experienced, and I'm grateful to be of service.
Can you tell us more about your work as a psychic detective medium?
Yes. First, I have to give my accolades to my mentor, Jeremy Turner Welch, at the London College of Psychic Studies. He's the one that taught me how to access the sixth sense. And my very first, he did not help me learn psychic detective, but he allowed me to step into this space. After I got comfortable with it, I was able to go back to my original awakening of purpose. I keep a dream journal, and when the world slowed down and I kept my dream journal, I would receive specific coordinates, images of missing persons. And nowadays, with technology, I could check the drawing that I made and the location on the globe and go to Google Maps and find it. And then I'd be so excited. I know where this missing child is. So I remember calling authorities in Paris, trying to report where this child was. And of course, they're like, "Are you crazy?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a good point." From their perspective, it would sound crazy. So after I studied with Jeremy Turner Welch and got more comfortable with it, my dreams became specific again to missing people. And then I trained with Pam Coronado, and she studied with or is part of the ilk of Noreen Renier. And these two powerhouses simply taught me how to shift my intention from interacting with the person sitting across from me in the form of a reading to instead setting the intention as a detective, an officer, an FBI, a CIA agent, someone whose intention is finding a killer or finding a missing person. So it's the same process, just it tweaks the way that I connect and the specifics for which I am looking.
So I'm sure you must be facing challenges because law enforcement and all that side of things is they're skeptics, and they're people who don't believe in, they believe in evidence, they believe in proof. And this is a zone where the trust comes from within. So how are you able to match those two in your work?
Thank you so much for asking. God, spirit, source works so mysteriously, but what I found is if I just put myself out there and speak openly about what I do, I will simply suggest if you're interested in learning more about my process, please email or call me. So I've had, I'm going to say detectives, but the broader term is law enforcement agents. I've had detectives come in for readings to test me. They've reached out via cell phone or email, but always privately. And I will never divulge if I've worked with someone in law enforcement. Now, the flip side is if I have worked on a case, then another law enforcement agent will ask me for references, and then I will share with whom I worked. So it's all kind of behind the scenes.
What's the most common misconception people have about mediumship?
That it's scary and that it's the work of the devil. But to me, that's just leftover messaging from hardwiring. People always look at religion, tradition, society, but from a historical perspective, when we were multiple villages, we all had our own gods, goddesses, and means of connecting to nature and intuition. But as the population grew, that's impossible to keep track of or navigate. So I understand logistically why they went from polytheistic, individual to monotheistic, streamlined. It served society, but the unintended consequences was that any person that had direct knowledge of source or intuition was considered the devil. So the biggest misconception is that it's scary, that I see dead people, and that people are worried about me. When to me, it feels very natural and comforting. So that's the most common misconception.
And there's a question which came to my mind, and I always wonder about this, is that with all the gifts that you have and the extra senses, there might be incidents where you're crossing people on the street, you meet people everywhere in our everyday life, and then you get a message about someone on the street or outside and you don't know that person. So would you go and tell them, or would you withhold that information? So how do you navigate such a situation? Because with your vision, if you're able to see something extra, I've always wondered that how would a medium navigate that situation?
Again, this is where I'm grateful for being formally trained. If it's a scenario where it's a message, that's just a message, that it's not immediate danger, I'll keep it to myself. I might stand near the person and see if we lock eyes or see if they strike up a conversation. But usually I'll just thank the spirit, I'll thank them for the message and say, this is not appropriate. But if it's something that implies danger, especially with domestic abuse, then oftentimes I will make a point to introduce myself to the person, strike up a conversation, and see what happens. And in those cases, usually the tears spring up and the woman will say, I don't know why, but I'm just so happy you said hi to me. And then they just kind of gush out some problem that's been burdening them.
How can esotericism be used for personal growth and healing? And I also want to ask these questions because a lot of the listeners who listen are not that much actively into the psychic side of things. So how can it be used if it's an introduction to them too?
Well, it really helps us understand our own intuition, and it validates what we actually know to be true. And I think it's fascinating if you look up the definition of esotericism, it's hidden, secret, which I find fascinating because in actuality, it's the most natural, abundant in the light. It's what allowed us to thrive thousands and thousands of years ago. But again, as we needed to have better management with large populations, we went from villages to big cities. The best way to control and send a singular message was to squash and demonize that aspect. But how does it help us? It serves as guidance, mentorship, a sounding board. So people that seek psychics, mediums, it can serve as, instead of going to a priest or a minister or an imam, and instead of going to a religious leader for guidance, you could seek someone in this field. If you're a business owner, instead of going to the Small Business Association seeking mentorship, you could seek someone in this field. So it's basically helping you to trust your own intuition, not to lead you, but how to ironically trust yourself.
I've always wondered because I feel like in our society, we are told to deny a few things, especially as I experienced loss in my life. And I'm wanting to bring some more guests forward who talk about grief and loss. And it's a little shocking to me that 95% of the people don't want to talk about that side of their life, or more than a lot of people. For a long time, I would hold back this from everybody in my life, that I have these senses and I can feel these things, until I realized that I need to accept myself, and that's all that matters. But it surprises me a lot that we are taught that we need to just keep that side of that truth of our life away, which is death and the other side and the psychic senses.
This field is also helpful for grief. And I don't control how spirit uses me. I can only offer to serve every day. And I think the most devastating type of death is suicide. My grandmother committed suicide when her child was young, and that was generational grief. But I think that's why in my service, many people that come to me for traditional readings, it's to connect with a loved one who committed suicide. And the amount of relief, the burden of pain that's lifted after people sit with me and they're able to speak and say the words they never had an opportunity to say to their loved one. And for the loved one in spirit to communicate or convey specific memories and reasons for, and most importantly, that they're at peace. The most common messages I get from those who passed via self-inflicted wounds is that, one, to the surviving loved ones, there's nothing they could have done to prevent it. And two, that they're at peace on the other side, and that's so healing. If you'll allow me, you mentioned that we're taught to keep it inside. May I share the 3 highlights of my journey?
Yes, definitely.
The first experience I had, I was 21 years old. I was a teacher at Deltona High School, driving at like 6 o'clock in the morning on a light, drizzly highway. And I overcorrected when I changed lanes, and my car spun out of control. And I am a control freak. And it was complete loss of control. So I took my hands off the wheel. Like I knew there was nothing I could do. And the car spun 4 times. It didn't flip, thank God. It spun. And during that time, I felt such peace. I felt brilliant white light and pure love. And I heard the words, I am with you. I am with you. Tracy, you're not alone. And that was so remarkable. It stuck with me. But then marriage, planning a wedding, teaching students, I get back into the busyness of life, and I kind of forgot about that experience. And then I was diagnosed with melanoma. Fortunately, I caught it early because of intuition, and they were able to remove, believe it or not, a teeny tiny speck on my inner knee resulted in this much flesh being removed from my my leg. And I couldn't walk, I couldn't exercise. I was just kind of forced to sit still. But a girlfriend suggested that I try meditation. And I was able to access just a snippet of that original feeling when I lost control all those decades earlier. And then more recently, as far as stepping into the light and sharing with my family, it's interesting because today marks 2 years ago that many people were taken hostage in the Middle East. And one of the people taken hostage by Hamas was a young woman named Sahar Calderon. And she did not make herself known. Spirit made itself known to me. And I wrote in my journal. I drew a picture of her I drew the name Sarah Calderon, close, but not quite exact. And then I received exactly what was happening to her, where she was. But I also received the message that she would be released around Thanksgiving. I think my days are right. But the family was together, and now armed with my journal, with my pictures, my dates, when they announced that she was released, I paused the television, I held up my journal, and I showed it to my family. And I'm like, I have 600 specific incidents logged. This is real. This is a part of me, and I need to share it with you. I'm still me, but I needed to let them know.
Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, Tracy, especially when you told the story about your car and the voice which came through. I felt it very strongly. And the work which you do with passed on loved ones, and this, I'm feeling each of. I feel like in some of the interviews, I try to stay a little more in my mind so that I can ask questions, I can be logical, I can like get that interaction going. But this is one of those interviews where I am feeling this, that there's more than one sense with which I'm connecting to you with.
Oh, how beautiful.
So there's a question which I wanted to ask you, because I like to like have the interaction going, and it's like devil's advocate. So I grew up in the Eastern culture, where in India, where the thought was always this: we believed in the afterlife, we believed in everything. So it was easier for me to always, it was very normal. And there's always been this one belief that things are meant to be and things happen in their timing, in divine timing. And then when I faced loss in my life and I processed those things, and eventually with now, I've come to this piece that things happen with divine timing. But as someone who's been on this side of loss, there's always this question where this person, and I think you've experienced that too, where the person feels that I could have done something more. And we give ourselves more pain with that thought that we could have loved more, we could have done something more. But at the same time, then there's this factor of divine timing. We could not have changed that moment where the person transitioned over. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that. Do you believe that time is fixed in that sense, or are we able to sometimes prevent such a thing?
My instinct is telling me some loss can be prevented if we trust our intuition. For example, if you're a parent of a child and you have a pool and you're very worried that your child might drown, but you don't get the child's swimming lessons, like your intuition taught you that's dangerous, get swimming lessons. If you're in a position of power, mostly I think as a parent, or if you're getting into an elevator and you suddenly have a full body hit, get out, get out. If you listen to your intuition, that can prevent loss. But each of us is born with free will. And it is not our job or responsibility to control other people's lives and decisions. So in that aspect, we are powerless. The only thing we can control is our mindset and our intention. And that's so unbelievably powerful. And I keep using that word. I wish I had a better synonym, but our future is not fixed. It's constantly moving and changing. And the one thing I've learned is that our ancestors, spirit guides, guardian angels are constantly with us, nurturing and encouraging us into our purpose and path. But it's our purpose and path. So if we set our mindset on pursuing one career, that's where our support team, our spiritual support team, will guide us. If we set our intention at any moment, if we change lanes or shift gears going in a different direction, that's where they will support us. So it's ultimately the power of our intention and the ability to practice healthy detachment. No matter how much we love people and our families and our friends, they are autonomous. They have control over their mindset. We can only control our own.
Is there any incident which you would like to share which shaped your life?
Yes, I worked a little bit backward on that. I mentioned melanoma was a huge one, but let me share one for your entrepreneurs and your very traditional Western audience. After I was diagnosed with melanoma, I decided to solve the problem. So I resigned as a teacher and I went to our sons, who were teenagers at the time, and they love to go outside. They're golfers, lacrosse, and we're in Florida. And I'm like, genetically, you are predisposed to skin cancer. You have to wear sunscreen. We hate sunscreen. You have to wear sun protective clothing. It doesn't breathe. It looks ugly. And exasperated as a mom, I said, all right, if I find a fabric, if I make clothing that you like, will you wear it? They said yes. So that's it. I started Protect Your Tail, sun protective clothing. My husband and I moved out west when I was accepted into a business incubator. We grew this company. We were very common out west. We were in all the high-end stores, resorts. It was awesome. And then government policy closed us down at COVID. So right at a critical point when I had like $1 million in orders coming in from ski resorts and country clubs and fitness centers and pickleball and all these outdoor activities, everything stopped. All the orders were canceled, everything shut down, and that was hard. And I was a small business, so I didn't like selling online. And when I sold my business to someone who enjoys selling online instead of face to face, that was really when everything got quiet. And I turned back to my meditation, my daily practices. And the great news is my intuition showed up and I'm able to serve as a psychic medium.
What is something which is very close to your heart, or what is something you're passionate about other than your work?
Serving as a wise woman. I think there's a dearth, at least in the US, there seems to be a dearth of good role models, mothers, grandmothers, wise women in the community. And this goes for men as well. But I think women need positive role models. And if they don't have that in their life, they should seek one out. Women do have control. Women are empowered. Just generally speaking, a lot of the women with whom I've worked are kind of stuck in blaming a culture or blaming a situation rather than looking inward and trusting their intuition.
Thank you so much. I'm all for supporting women, and there's something I read somewhere, and I thought I would ask you. It just came to my mind, is that I've always read that women are spiritually more powerful than men. Like they have the inner world, they're more powerful. And for lack of a better word, I'm using the word powerful because some of these words don't describe the exact feeling. And men are more powerful in the outer world. I just see it as physical strength at times. That's all. I don't see it as anything else personally.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What are your feelings?
Well, ultimately, you boil down the message into one symbol of yin and yang. And in essence, women are Sophia. Women are intuition. Women are wisdom. And men are action. And when I use these terms, again, just so we hit everyone in your audience, we're not speaking of gender. We're speaking of brain, left hemisphere, right hemisphere, wisdom and logic, wisdom and action. And together, we're unstoppable. So, for example, in my marriage, we're coming up on 34 years. I have the wisdom. My husband has lots of wisdom as well, of course. But if there's ever like a gut instinct, we had young children, and I just looked at him one day. I said, "We have to move. We can't live in this neighborhood. It's not going to work." He's like, "What? What?" I'm like, "We got to go." So his action was to be a great financial provider and help me look at houses. And then he helped me with logistics as I was finding the best neighborhood where to raise our kids. He's the action, I'm the intuition.
So, in essence, it's all about balance.
100%. And we have to be balanced. I am completely rooted in reality. I'm equally balanced. My husband is rooted in reality and very open and balanced, meaning open to his wife stepping into the light as a psychic medium. And I think a lot of relationships break up after one person is awakened because it's just too much to handle. But I'm very fortunate. My husband's always been very intelligent, very curious, and always learning. So as long as I'm still me and not trying to persuade him to have my beliefs, it's just a brilliant balance.
Thank you. It's amazing to have found that balance.
Yes, it is.
Who has been the most influential person in your life and how have they impacted you?
I really thought about this, and I'm going to have to go with two people. So, first is my mother. My mother, my father, who was very rooted in reality, would often look at my mom and say, "What planet are you living on? Like, what world are you living on?" Because she would wake up every day. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, let's go out and explore. She's still alive, hikes 10 miles a day out in Southern California, very independent. She's wonderful. But as a child, she always taught me that the world is a place to enjoy. I never was raised with fear. I never felt fear. And that really opened up all the channels for me to better receive all the love and the energy that's out there. And two, my husband, we met very young, but he is limitless. Like if you offer him two options, do you want to travel to Paris or do you want to travel to Mexico? He's going to say both. He doesn't ever see limits. And I would say, but we need a budget. He's like, no, you just go make more money. Like just so practical. And together, the messaging of to go forth, enjoy the world, don't live in fear, and that there are no limits. We're limitless creatures. Together really shaped me.
Is there any advice you would give your younger self looking back at your life now?
Absolutely. Instead of pushing, and having every minute of every 24 hours in a day scheduled, I would have slowed down. I would have started meditating at a younger age, and I would have started seeking validation from my internal knowing rather than trying to please others.
What do you feel the purpose of life is for you? Or, in other words, what do you feel is your personal quest in life?
Helping people maximize their full potential while normalizing spiritual gifts. I know that sounds broad, but our access to our sixth sense and our intuition is malleable. It's an ingredient that can be used to enhance other people's purpose. I like to help people heal from grief, from leaving bad relationships, from addiction, and help them understand how to lean into their own purpose and path. I'm serving as a spiritual mentor, a wise woman, Whether it's a detective asking for help on a cold case, or a family member whose loved one someone suddenly went missing, whether it's a couple that is on the verge of divorce, whatever it is, if they bring an intention to me, Spirit works through me to help them overcome it or maximize it.
Is there any book, quote, or philosophy that has shaped your outlook on life?
Yes. A quote, the first one from when I was younger, I watched a movie from, I believe it's the 50s or 60s called Auntie Mame. And this is a gregarious character. She lives over the top in joy. But her phrase, her quote was, "Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving." And I love that because it's true. Life is out there. You just have to get out there and live it. And two, my own quote, write your own ending. You are in control from this very moment to the end of your life. Each one of your listeners is in control of their life. So those are my favorite two quotes.
Thank you, Tracy. I think I'll carry that always. Write your own ending.
Yes.
And I'll keep it with me.
Mm-hmm.
So before I move on to the next question, there's something which came back to me from the previous questions you had answered. And you talked a little bit about, you mentioned fear. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that from your perspective, because there's so much fear in today's times. And in my opinion, one of the reasons everything is so crazy is also because fear is rising. So what do you feel?
First of all, I agree. If you look back from a physiological point or perspective, or think of an animal, a dog, a cat, for our physical bodies to survive, we have to stay away from fear. Fear is what motivates the most base survival instincts. Fear of being eaten, fear of being attacked. So it's wired into our ancient brain. People are more comfortable avoiding fear than pursuing gratitude. It's just how it is. And people, it depends on their mindset, but people will always fall to the depths, the lower vibration, the mud that sucks us down of fear. That's more comfortable for most people rather than ignoring the instinct of fear and to lean into gratitude. Look at what you do have. You have the sun, the rain, the grass, whatever you have in front of you, be grateful for it. And that can help prevent you from falling prey to the messaging of fear, which, let's face it, that's a form of manipulation and control.
If it were an ideal world, what does that look like in your eyes?
Girls would be taught to trust their intuition from the time they were 6 months old. And they would learn to trust their gut and make better decisions. And again, I'm not discounting the men, but in general, I've found that men want to please women. And again, I'm not speaking of gender as much as how your brain is wired. So men want to please women. Women actually run the show. And if girls were taught to trust their intuition, when they're teenagers and they feel like a boy they're dating or a person they're dating is negative, they're not going to go back on that second date. They're not going to have children with a bad person. They're not going to stay in poor relationships. Or when they're a mother and their child comes to them and says, "Mommy, this person is hurting me," they're going to handle their business. Most of the problems in the world, in my opinion and my life experience of 55 years, is that women didn't trust their intuition. And mothers didn't address it. They couldn't believe it when their children were being abused in horrific ways by the very people the child should have trusted. And that sets off a domino effect of generations. And it's all because women weren't taught to trust their intuition. So in my world, girls will value their intuition, choose good men. Men are going to make more positive actions because they want to please the women.
Thank you, Tracy. That's beautiful. What is something that you would like the world to know about you, which you feel is often misunderstood?
Believe it or not, that was the most interesting question. And thank you for supplying some ahead of time. So I had an idea. But I had a traditional answer, and I'm like, no. Looking back, I've never been misunderstood. Mediumship is misunderstood. But as for me, no matter what I've done in my life as an entrepreneur, a teacher, a psychic medium, I'm so confident in what I do that frankly, I scare people. I always am intimidating, and I don't realize it. But I'm the one at a party that's going to be sitting quiet in a corner, observing everyone. I'm the one that is right in front of you that you don't even notice.
From your entire journey in life so far, what would you like to share with our listeners which you feel would be helpful to them?
You are not alone. Your ancestors, literally, the lineage, they are around you. Their energies are around you. Your spirit guides, guardian angels are literally around you all the time to best support your purpose and path. And that can change depending on your mindset, but you're not alone. And when you smell that perfume, or when you're making your great grandmother's recipe and you remember her, when you remember your grandfather and the pipe or the lessons he taught, they're there. It's real.
Thank you, Tracy. Those were all my questions. This was most wonderful. Is there anything else which you would like to say or add?
Well, I would like to ask people to please sign up for my blog on my website, which is tracyolsen.com. And that gives my full awakening stories and will allow them to learn more about me and how I may be of service to them.
And I will be sharing all the links below the video when the episode airs, so you can check it out there too. Thank you so much, Tracy. This has been most wonderful. And thank you for making an impact on my life and giving me a lot more to feel. Thank you.